Welcome back to my channel. Today we will learn about the issue that has rocked the very foundation of Port Charles on ABC's General Hospital. In a series of heart-stopping events, long-hidden secrets and raw emotions have converged in a dramatic confrontation that has left lives shattered and alliances tested beyond measure. In this episode, the actions of a few key players have set off a chain reaction that now threatens to upend the fragile order in our community. Let's dive right into the unfolding saga and recount every crucial detail. It all began on a fateful night when Joss, overwhelmed by terror and desperation, found herself in a life-or-death struggle against Cyrus. For years, Cyrus had built a notorious reputation, his past marred by violence and deceit, even as he attempted to reinvent himself as a man of faith. But that facade could not conceal his true nature forever. On that night, as Cyrus moved in to attack Joss with lethal intent, the young woman's survival instincts kicked in. In a moment of pure instinct and self-defense, Joss fought back, her actions fueled by the need to protect herself from the man who had haunted her for so long. In the chaos of that violent encounter, Joss managed to pull out her phone and, with trembling fingers, dialed Brennan's number. Her voice, shaking with fear and urgency, pleaded for help as she explained that Cyrus was attacking her. Brennan, whose heart had always been entwined with the fates of those he cared about, especially Carly's daughter, raced to the scene without a moment's hesitation. When Brennan arrived, he was met with a gruesome sight. Cyrus lay sprawled on the ground, his body marred by deep wounds and a spreading pool of blood. Joss, in the midst of her panic, could only watch in shock as Brennan took control of the situation. Realizing the gravity of the situation and determined to protect the innocent, Brennan quickly assessed the scene. Knowing that Joss was his own flesh and blood, a beloved daughter of Carly, and understanding the heavy cost of letting a dangerous man roam free, Brennan resolved to ensure that Cyrus would never again threaten the people of Port Charles. With a steely determination that left no room for hesitation, Brennan gathered what little evidence he could and made a decisive choice. He would dispose of Cyrus's body in a way that left no trace of his heinous deeds. In a move that was as shocking as it was resolute, Brennan took the lifeless body of Cyrus and, with grim purpose, hurled it into the dark, flowing river that ran through Port Charles, hoping that the water would carry away any sign of Cyrus's presence and his blood-stained legacy. Yet even as Brennan sought to bury the physical evidence of Cyrus's violent end, the long arm of the law was closing in. The police, having been alerted by eyewitness reports and the growing chorus of public suspicion regarding Cyrus's involvement in numerous crimes, including the murders of Sam and Dex, were piecing together a damning case against him. Reports began to filter in from local residents who had seen or heard something suspicious near the river. Soon, authorities identified the body washed ashore, and forensic experts confirmed that it was indeed Cyrus. Despite these developments, no one had yet managed to directly apprehend him for the crimes he was suspected of committing. As the investigation progressed, attention quickly turned to other figures connected to this dark web of violence. Jason, a man with a tumultuous past and a protective nature that often bordered on the obsessive, soon found himself in the spotlight. It had long been known that Jason had once threatened Cyrus, especially during a heated confrontation when Cyrus had come dangerously close to harming Jason's own son, Danny. Given these past threats and the new evidence linking Cyrus to multiple murders, the police quickly grew suspicious that Jason might have been involved in Cyrus's death. Circumstantial evidence began to emerge: a discarded weapon here, a set of inconsistent statements there, and before long, the authorities arrested Jason on charges related to Cyrus's death. Jason vehemently protested his innocence, insisting that he had done nothing more than intervene to save Danny and, by extension, protect the fragile peace of Port Charles. Yet, the evidence against him seemed damning in the eyes of law enforcement. Whispers began to circulate among the police ranks and the community alike, suggesting that perhaps Brennan had manipulated the situation, staging the disposal of Cyrus's body in such a way as to shift the blame onto Jason. Whether or not this was true, the fact remained that Jason was now in police custody, his future hanging in the balance as investigators scrambled to piece together the complete truth. Deeply troubled by these events, Joss found herself caught in a vortex of conflicting emotions. Having witnessed the brutal death of Cyrus and the subsequent arrest of someone she had come to regard as family, Joss was overwhelmed by guilt and sorrow. Though she had acted in self-defense, the idea that her actions had indirectly led to Jason's arrest filled her with remorse. Jason, in her eyes, was like an older brother, a protective figure who had always stood by her side. The thought of him suffering for her mistake was unbearable, and she resolved that something must be done to set things right. Unable to bear the weight of this secret any longer, Joss made the heart-wrenching decision to come forward and confess everything to the authorities. In a quiet, desperate moment, she walked into the local police station, her hands shaking and her voice barely above a whisper, and recounted the entire sequence of events, from the initial confrontation with Cyrus to the frantic call to Brennan, and finally the discovery of Cyrus's body and its disposal into the river. Her confession was raw and unfiltered, an attempt to clear Jason's name and to ensure that the truth would not be buried beneath layers of deception. In doing so, however, Joss knew she was sealing her own fate. The police, now armed with her testimony, had no choice but to arrest her as well. Though her actions were driven by a desperate need to save someone she cared about, the law was unyielding, and Joss was taken into custody. In the days that followed, the ramifications of that fateful night rippled through the community. Jason was eventually released after further investigations cleared him of direct involvement in Cyrus's death, though the shadow of suspicion lingered over him. Meanwhile, the public's attention turned to Carly, who had long been a pillar of support and strength in Port Charles. Overwhelmed by the cascade of events and haunted by the consequences of secrets too heavy to bear, Carly once again pleaded with Brennan. Desperate to save her daughter from the legal and emotional turmoil now consuming the lives of those she loved, Carly begged Brennan to do everything in his power to rescue Joss from the clutches of the law. In her eyes, Joss was not just a victim of circumstance but an innocent soul ensnared in a web of betrayal and manipulation, a casualty of a chain of events that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. The question now loomed large over Port Charles: could Brennan, a man whose loyalty and resolve had once inspired hope, now rise to the occasion and save Joss from a fate she did not deserve? Brennan's own actions on that tragic night, disposing of Cyrus's body in the river in an effort to prevent further chaos, had been controversial, to say the least. While some viewed his decisive actions as necessary in a moment of crisis, others whispered that he might have been more interested in protecting his own secrets than in upholding justice. Was it possible that Brennan, in his attempt to shield himself and those he cared about, had inadvertently set events in motion that would lead to further bloodshed and heartache? As investigations continued and tensions simmered, the police dug deeper into the evidence surrounding Cyrus's violent spree. Forensic teams meticulously analyzed the scene where Cyrus was found, while detectives re-interviewed witnesses and pored over surveillance footage in an attempt to reconstruct the chain of events. With each passing day, the case against Cyrus grew stronger, and the pressure mounted on law enforcement to deliver justice. Yet, as the community of Port Charles braced itself for the eventual arrest of the man responsible for so many lives lost, a counter-current of suspicion began to circulate. Rumors spread that Brennan, always the enigmatic figure with a penchant for secretive operations, might have tampered with evidence or even manipulated the chain of events in order to deflect blame onto Jason. Such whispers only deepened the sense of mistrust and uncertainty among those who had once looked to Brennan as a steadfast protector. For Jason, the ordeal was a double-edged sword. Although he was eventually exonerated and released, the memory of that night and of being implicated in an act he did nothing more than try to prevent would haunt him for a long time to come. His relationship with Joss, once a source of strength and familial love, was now tinged with sorrow and regret, as he struggled to reconcile the role he had unwittingly played in the unfolding tragedy. He knew that deep down, Joss's decision to confess had been driven by a desperate desire to spare him further pain, yet he could not shake the burden of guilt that now weighed heavily on his conscience. As for Joss, her future now hung in the balance. Arrested for her role in the chain of events that led to Cyrus's death and the subsequent chaos, she faced an uncertain legal battle that threatened to upend her life completely. The shock of what had transpired, the adrenaline of the confrontation, the searing image of Cyrus's bloodied body, the crushing weight of responsibility left her emotionally and physically drained. Yet, amid the despair, there remained a glimmer of hope. By coming forward, Joss had taken the first step toward absolution. She hoped that by unburdening herself of the secret, she might one day begin to heal and perhaps, in time, regain a measure of peace. Back in the corridors of power and influence in Port Charles, Carly's voice rang out once more. With tears in her eyes and desperation in her heart, she implored Brennan to find a way to save her daughter from the harsh penalties of the law. Carly's plea was not just a cry for legal assistance, it was a desperate, maternal appeal to preserve the family she had fought so hard to keep together. To Carly, Joss was more than just a daughter, she was a symbol of hope, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, family could still endure. Carly knew that if Joss were to be condemned for acting in self-defense and in the pursuit of protecting those she loved, it would send ripples of despair through every corner of Port Charles. The community, already reeling from the shock of Cyrus's death and the turmoil that followed, could ill afford another tragedy. In this critical juncture, all eyes turned to Brennan. Will he be able to leverage his influence, his connections, and perhaps even the murky underbelly of Port Charles's secret networks, to extricate Joss from the clutches of the justice system? Will he use his considerable resources to cover up the events of that harrowing night, ensuring that the truth remains hidden and that those responsible for the mayhem do not pay the ultimate price? Or will the truth, as it often does in Port Charles, find a way to emerge, casting shadows over even the most well-laid plans? The stakes have never been higher, and every decision made in the coming days could determine the fate of not just one person, but of an entire community. As the investigation unfolds and the police continue to piece together every detail, from the forensic evidence at the riverbank to the testimonies of witnesses who recalled the tension and chaos of that fateful night, a narrative of betrayal, desperate love, and the search for redemption begins to crystallize. Rumors persist that Brennan, despite his seemingly protective actions, may have been involved in manipulating the evidence to shift blame away from himself and onto Jason. Whether these whispers hold any truth is a matter for future revelations, but they have already sowed seeds of distrust among those who once revered Brennan as a pillar of strength. The fallout from the night's events has already begun to reshape the lives of everyone involved. Jason, though eventually released, now carries the scars of having been falsely accused, his sense of justice and duty forever tarnished by the ordeal. Joss, trapped by her own confession and the weight of the truth, faces a long and uncertain path through the legal system, her fate hanging by a thread as she awaits the outcomes of the investigations. And Carly, burdened by the unrelenting pain of her daughter's arrest and the potential disintegration of her family, must now confront the heartbreaking reality that the price of secrets and lies may be far too high to bear. In the days that follow, as the community of Port Charles rallies in support of some while demanding answers from others, a palpable tension fills the air. The police continue to comb through evidence, revisiting old records and re-interviewing witnesses in a concerted effort to build an airtight case against those responsible for the violence that has rocked the city. Meanwhile, the media and local gossip circles buzz with speculation, each new detail adding to the complex mosaic of betrayal and retribution. Every mention of Cyrus's name evokes a mixture of fear and righteous anger, while the controversial actions of Brennan and the possibility that he may have orchestrated a cover-up leave many questioning where the true lines of loyalty and justice lie. As we stand on the brink of what promises to be a defining moment in Port Charles, the looming question remains: can justice prevail in a town where secrets run deep, where family loyalties are as fragile as they are fiercely guarded, and where the pursuit of truth often comes at an unbearable cost? For now, the fate of Joss remains uncertain, her future dependent on the outcome of a legal battle that is only just beginning. And for Carly, the painful hope that she can save her daughter rests squarely on Brennan's next move, a move that may either redeem him in the eyes of those he once protected or seal his fate as a manipulator willing to sacrifice innocence for his own survival. In conclusion, the chain of events that has led to Cyrus's brutal death, Joss's subsequent actions, and the fallout that has ensnared Jason and now threatens to upend the lives of Carly and her family stands as a stark reminder of the destructive power of vengeance and the far-reaching consequences of secrets kept in the shadows. With every passing hour, as the police close in on the truth and as the community of Port Charles holds its collective breath, the repercussions of that fateful night will continue to echo through every corner of our lives. Will justice, in its truest form, be served? Can Brennan salvage the fractured trust of those who once believed in him, or will his own actions ultimately condemn him as much as those he sought to protect? And most painfully, will Joss, a young woman caught in the crossfire of a bitter struggle for power and retribution, find any semblance of redemption before it is too late? Thank you for joining me today as we delved into this long and harrowing chapter of ABC's General Hospital. Stay tuned for more updates as this intense saga continues to unfold, and remember, sometimes the pursuit of truth comes with a price that can never be repaid. Until next time, keep watching, and stay safe.